But perhaps we could go back to the early 60s when you first began to sing publicly. It seemed to me that the early 60s had two major musical characteristics. First, the characteristic of the cliche and repetition of Tin Pan Alley, of the tradition of the crass early pop music of the 50s. And when you first began to sing, you came in a completely different tradition, the tradition of Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, the tradition of the rambling folk singer. So, what, in your view, from somebody who stood right in the middle of all the changes in the music scene of the 1960s, are the major developments and influences on music, and what is your assessment of the present trends in music?
Okay, well, this will take a little bit of time here. Okay, now when you're talking about the crass music of the 50s, I like that music, and I consider it as valuable as Woody Guthrie and the folk thing. I don't differentiate. And as a matter of fact, I consider the crass music of the 50s. I mean, when it comes from country, black, either white country or black R&B roots. I mean, the real folk music of America. Elvis Presley. I mean, to me, Elvis Presley ultimately is a folk singer. I mean, in 100 years from now, people could well think of him as a folk singer. Okay, and that's my background. I mean, before I went to the Newport Folk Festival when I was in my teens, my favorite music was not Woody Guthrie or Pete Seeger. My favorite music was rock and roll. Okay, and from then I went to college, and folk music was coming into vogue. The Kingston Trio was very big. Of course, the Kingston Trio came in just like another pop group, and except they were folk based on the most commercial plane. And so I got into the Kingston Trio. From there I got into Pete Seeger, and there I got into Woody Guthrie. And my roommate, who was a socialist and a guitar player named Jim Glover, who was this group Jim and Jean later. And so he taught me to play the guitar. And then as soon as I was a journalism major, and all this was around the time of like the Bay of Pigs, and like when all that sort of was happening, that's when I became very political. Before then, I wasn't even political, So, but I'm going to school, and all these different influences came together, and I became, in 1961, a socialist and a folk singer, just right on the spot, really. And as soon as I learned the guitar, I mean, literally the first couple of weeks I was writing songs, and I still don't know why, but songs just started coming out of me totally subconsciously. And like the first song I wrote was about the Cuban invasion. And after I wrote about 13 songs, I quit college after 3 years and went to New York, and became in the middle of that folk thing, and there was Dylan, and there was all these people around the village, and so folk music at that point became very, let's say, flowered, became very very powerful. It almost started competing with pop, in terms of, I mean, it became, almost commercially as good to be a folk singer, by yourself, than to be the best rock and roll band. And that was about 63, 64, and of course in that what was very strong, and I'm not sure about historically, but for something that popular, a very strong left wing and intelligent message, and a change in the idea of songwriting. Whereas before, great songwriting was like Cole Porter. Great songwriting became, Bob Dylan, or became the introduction of real thought, and attempts at poetry into a folk song and or a popular song. And so all that came to a head. At that point, it evolved again in the village through various musicians, formed groups like the Byrds and the Loving Spoonful, and all those groups came along, who sort of like put some mild rock back into it, and the whole idea of folk rock went around. And into that picture came drugs, which I think ruined everything. So, in my opinion, I thought drugs just blew music apart. Groups like the Jefferson Airplane and many of the groups that have come since then, I thought just lost all control. And and as far as I'm concerned, my interest is in somehow getting back to the working class. My idea that working class, I mean, your word was crass, my word is working class music of the 50s rock. I mean, the primitive. I mean, you know, if you walk into any bar in America, down south especially, or in the Midwest a lot, you'll find your basic, you know, 5-piece country band who can do all the old hits through the years, you know. And to me, that's the core of the music I like. Now, what I would like to do is write songs that have, in that idiom, that have a political context. You know, and that's where greatest, and I mean, leading up to the last record I made, Greatest Hits, was getting into that area, and now I'm trying to continue that area. And I did a 3-week tour when I tried to do that. That's where the gold suit comes in, and all that kind of stuff. But usually I still, like in this trip to Australia, I'm still basically the Greenwich Village folk singer. You know, I always have been. Except on recordings, I'm attempting certain things, and if I write the songs that I want, I'll again do another gold suit tour.
Didn't always get you a very good reaction then.
Oh no, I got a lot of bad reaction. But it depends. I mean, the listening audience should know the brief story of that. That's in 1970. When Presley made his comeback, and Presley didn't sing in public for 9 years. Then he announced he was returning to the stage in Las Vegas. You know, so I was there in the front row. You know, when he came back. You know, and it was like, to me, you know, I mean, here was my 15-year-old idol. You know, back on stage, looking and singing better than ever. So I mean, my reaction was to stumble back, and I flashed on the idea of wouldn't it be incredible if a left-wing folk singer put on the gold suit. Now, the gold suit, you know, it was of course Colonel Parker, Presley's manager's idea of how to package the pop singer. You know, the country, take the country boy, and there's all. I mean, Woody Guthrie's the country boy in a way. Hank Williams is the country boy. Take the country boy, you know, Elvis Presley, and idealize them, you know, I mean, in the crassest possible way, you know, put him in that gold suit, which I mean, apparently President didn't like that either, you know, but he went along with it, and it's just a fantastic, you know, it's fantastic theatrics is what it is, and so I thought it'd be an incredible culture shock as a folk singer, as a say Marxist folk singer, to jump into that and try and define that, not just as crass and everything, but that Colonel Parker understands the working class better than the American Communist Party. I mean, Colonel Parker is able to deal with them on a one-to-one level, give them what they want, and satisfy their primary interests, and have it run, you know, for 20, 30 years with one guy, which is the Communist Party has never been able to do, and there's things to learn from him and them, and he is doing it from a working class point of view. Okay, end of speech.
Many people have maintained that Chicago marks a sort of a turning point for the American revolutionary tradition. How did you see Chicago? How did it affect you personally? And how has it been exhibited through your music?
So by the time of Chicago, I was I've been singing political songs for about 7 years, I guess, and at that point, at the time of Chicago, politically, I was involved in 3 main areas. Number one, I was campaigning for McCarthy at the time. I helped found the Yippies, and I was also, of course, part of the general anti-war movement. And I went to Chicago a week before the convention, and I was there during the whole week, and I was sort of doing all different functions. I mean, like I'd be doing a Yippie thing, like right before the convention started. You know, we remember the pig being nominated for president. That was, you know, 7 people. I was one of the 7. We were the first people arrested in Chicago before the Blitz, and then singing at the you know, Johnson's birthday party, or or running inside the Hilton Hotel, with McCarthy, kind of middle class things going on, and also making a conscious effort to watch it in television as it was going on. I was trying to sort of like have reality and watch it in television at the same time. It was very difficult, and then being part of the Dave Dillinger and the anti-war march and all that, and getting caught right in the middle of where the police attacked at the Hilton, and surviving it, with a few no bruises. And when it was over, I was the liberal Democrat in me was destroyed. I mean, that's where rehearsals for retirement comes. The death of the liberal American on the thought that you run both currents. You run my basic philosophy is always any support for the left. I'm basically a democratic socialist, and whenever I see anything healthy, as I would consider, Eugene McCarthy healthy or McGovern healthy now, I'll support that, and then always critically. There was one time we're doing Madison Square Garden, and I was criticizing McCarthy right before he went on. I was saying, you got to watch this guy kind of talking right before he even went on, And I wasn't ever stopped from that. Nobody said, "Don't say that." I mean, toward the end, in Chicago, they were keeping me away from delegates, and kind of stuff. But publicly, I was saying very strong things, and even in the McGovern, even the night McGovern won California, and I was singing at the Palladium, where all the workers had gathered. After an encore, I yelled out "Victory for the NLF," which got a big cheer from the McGovern workers, and so on Chicago, I thought at the time Chicago was the end of the electoral process in America.
You term yourself a democratic socialist. Is that in the tradition of social democrats, or do you stress the democratic side over the socialist side, or are you really a socialist who believes that the authoritarian and totalitarian nature of socialist states, perhaps as particularly exhibited in Eastern European countries, is to be abhorred, and that therefore you stress that all socialist models must be democratic?
Well, I'll put it this way. I'm a socialist, and that means to me that I believe in public ownership of the major means of production and all natural resources. Number one, I think there still should be private, small businesses in the socialist system, and I'm for as much freedom as is possible historically. Eastern Europe is the worst example of socialism or communism, because that's where, say, semi-advanced nations were overrun in a wartime situation, and literally were occupied by a stronger military power, and being socialist anyway, and have been living under their rule, ever since. So it became some kind of socialist colonies, which is of course a total different example than Cuba or China. We have, or Russia itself, where you have an organic revolution that comes from within. Cuba is, let's say, the best example. You have a revolution, you throw out the foreign influence of another country, America in that case, and you just start to define the revolution as you go along. And even though Cuba is under Russian influence strongly, they still have their own model and that's the way it should happen. If there's going to be a communist Hungary, it should happen, from the communists being able to take over Hungary from within Hungary, without Russia bringing in the tanks, or Czechoslovakia, all those countries. If there was a moral socialist thinking going on in the world, Russia would obviously withdraw from Eastern Europe and let them take their chances.
Can we look at some of your early political writings?
Well, like I said, when the conception of myself as a songwriter came to me subconsciously, that it just came out that way. I was very political. I was arguing, and for some reason, I don't know, I was very hypersensitive to Vietnam before the anti-war movement started. I mean, when people just didn't even know Vietnam existed, I was writing those songs, and some of the beginnings of the mentality about the war came from those first 3 Electra records. Had a very important political impact in terms of spreading an anti-war mentality before the first marches, in terms of even soldiers that went to Vietnam. I heard scattered stories of how either the record or the tapes went to Vietnam with them, and you'd find even in Green Beret bases that the concert record, which has the poems of Mao Zedong in the back, was being played over the loudspeaker to these soldiers who were surrounded by the communists outside.
What about a song like Knock on My Door? Is that anti-totalitarian or anti-communist?
That's around Eastern European kind of stuff.
So basically you're anti-totalitarian rather than anti-communist.
Right. Oh no. Like I said, I'm pro-communist.
But in your earlier stuff, I ain't marching anymore. In particular, you wrote of the song "That Was the President" that my Marxist friends can't understand why I wrote this song, and that's probably one reason why I'm not a Marxist.
Yeah,
and this essentially, I mean,
that was a very early stage of my thinking. At that point, I didn't consider myself a Marxist, and my politics is all instinctual. Anyway, I would now basically consider myself a Marxist, but I couldn't really defend it intellectually. If somebody started, arguing points of it.
Yeah, can we look specifically then at even the trade union movement? In Links on a Chain, it seems to me you're taking a fairly naive view of the role of labour. How would you assess labour today?
Links in the Chain, the song says, look, you guys actually went through a semi-revolutionary struggle, and you fought the cops, and you did this, you got beat over the head, and you gained something, and now why don't you open your eyes and look, here's another group of people doing the same thing, and why aren't you in there with them, or why do you try to block them? I mean, so I don't think that's naive.
How do you feel about, what seems to be an enlightened apathy, if you like, today, compared with sort of the rage of the 60s? It seems to me that the rallies and demonstrations don't draw with quite the same crowds, with quite the same fervour that they used to.
Because demonstrations were stymied. I mean, they had the biggest demonstrations in American history, and they didn't produce the result, and the drug factor, and the lack of a real socialist party to operate around it, or any kind of political force to operate around. And once again, it goes back to McGovern that it's not an enlightened apathy now. It's an incredibly well organized campaign that's being run right now, and the reason McGovern's in power is not because McGovern's strong. It's because of all those people that were at the demonstrations and are now coalescing and getting back there, and that's only the beginning. I mean, what you've seen so far will be approximately a quarter of what's going to happen next, where all those people are just going to come out of the woodwork, literally.
Like in the mid '60s, I think you'd come to a point where you considered that the art or craft of songwriting was more important than its political content.
The way I feel about that is I always think that the aesthetics of songwriting have to come first before any politics. I mean, there's no point in writing a political tract in the arts, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's useless. It does more harm than good. So therefore, if you're going to make a political statement in any art form, I was talking about song, but if you're doing a movie or anything else, the first thing that's got to be in your mind, from my point of view, it's got to be great. I mean, you're going to make a political movie, so it's got to be a great political movie, and it works well. If you have a political mentality anyway, if you're a Marxist, or if you're talking about the class struggle, or you're talking about a certain strike, and you have the good position on it anyway. I mean that's sort of assumed, and your script writer and all these people you're going to work with are sort of there. But the trick then is to devote all your energies to the aesthetics of it.
Untitled Ochs dub edited version, tape 2.
That seems a very sarcastic, very cynical attitude. Had your view changed, or had the climate in which you worked changed?
But once again, all these songs come subconsciously. I don't know. I mean, that's just a song that came out one day.
Were you sort of predictive in that song, or how exactly do you see the draft movement?
Well, I mean, I think the anti-war movement is the most vital, political force in America. And other things feed off it. I mean, I just happened to write that song, like I said earlier. I mean, the draft on drag was just like taking like a little side view of the predicament of the guy who believes, who wants to go along with everything about America, but count me out when push comes to shove. I mean, the draft on drag is not a straight anti-war song, I mean, so therefore, like that was one of the few songs I had that got in television, like something because it wasn't hard line. Somebody actually sang it in the Smothers Brothers show once,
Can you ally possibly to Love Me, I'm a Liberal, the same sort of cynical look at what's happening?
Well, Love Me, I'm a Liberal, I think, is a clear analysis of the liberal position, of an attack on it, and it suits me too, at times. But it's very striking, it's like Aldrich Cleaver heard my records, and that's the song I like the best.
Could one say that you were, in fact, in Love Me, I'm a Liberal, laughing at or criticising some of the views you'd held 5 years before?
Yeah, sure. Or veer around. I mean, it's a basic, critique of the middle class political mentality, which is always around, and it has moments of strength and weakness. And that was the song I sang in front of McCarthy, in Madison Square Garden, which got as big a response as McCarthy got.
Now, in your Inconstant record, you have a very sarcastic jibe at Dylan, and later on in another song. Well, what exactly was your relationship with Dylan?
I was just making fun of him. I love Dylan. I think Dylan's the best writer of the century. Period. And I spent about 4 or 5 years with him in his real creative years, which I'm very glad to have done. And Dylan was getting very arrogant, and because he was so good, and all this adulation was flying towards him. And he was aware of that. I mean, when he started out, he was trying to avoid it, but it was just too much. He was just too good, and it just swamped him. And so he just started going crazy, with all of it. And apparently he got a good view of that in Australia when he came around here, because that was like toward the tail end of it. And but when I made that record and those comments, I mean, people will make more of those comments on what was going on. At that point, we were still very friendly. And then we had a falling out, in that story when he finally started to slip as a songwriter. I thought we started putting out these bad singles like "Please Crawl Out of Your Window," and he played me a record, and I said, "What do you think?" And I said I didn't like it, and then he wouldn't speak to me. I mean, that was the only time where an actual falling out happened, and right after that he had the accident, and then I didn't see him for 3 or 4 years, and I just seen him this year a few times, and just like before, friendly and swapping songs and what's happening, and
You once said that Dylan is like LSD on stage. What do you mean by that, and how do you view that sort of statement in view of your attitude towards LSD?
Well, I mean, at that point, I was just using a metaphor. That interview was 1965, and I was just using a metaphor of the flash. I mean, the sort of the blinding flash of all knowledge that people get on LSD. Now the white light, and now I see God, and I know what death is, and and this, I mean, that kind of thing. I mean, just to be able to put that into words. I mean, the mystical experience put into concrete words and concrete images. That's what I meant by that.
You sang in outside of a small circle of friends that smoking marijuana was more fun than drinking beer.
Well, I'm changing that.
And was this a frontal attack on the counterculture? And how do you see it? Can you
the verse you're talking about, smoking marijuana is more fun than drinking beer. It is an attack on the lack of politics of the counterculture at that time. You got to remember again, back when acid was introduced on a mass level by Tim Leary and others in 1967, it was done in a very non-political and even anti-political context. And at that point, there was a very huge political movement going on. I mean, the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement were coalescing, and there was a lot of very good political thinking going on at that point. Into that was introduced acid, and it was and Leary would come out and say, "It's all a game. Don't get involved with it. Stay away from it. Instead, take this drug and understand yourself." And literally just pulled away a whole bunch of very good people, and a lot of people were ruined off that. And really damaged the movement, and that became Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock, and all that, which I think has very limited value. I think if that hadn't happened, I mean, if acid was not even brought in, it just was headed off. The whole idea of drugs was just headed off before it came in there and into America. That the movement, I mean, I think there probably would have been revolution. I think there would have been an armed revolution around the time of Kent State.
What were you trying to do musically in an artistic way when you put out records like Pleasures of the Harbour? It seems to me that on two of your most interesting tracks in your earlier records of The Highwayman and the Edgar Allan Poe poem Bells, which are in the main artistic. Was this an attempt to follow through such?
Well, at that point, also at that point, I was taking dope. I mean, I smoked grass for 5 years straight, and until I got tired of it, and then I decided, even philosophically, that it was wrong.
That drinking beer was more fun than smoking dope.
I started drinking beer was more fun than smoking dope, right? I don't care that much about grass. It doesn't mean that. I mean, I'm against acid, period, because I've seen what it's done to too many people, and of course I'm against speed and heroin and the rest. I'm not against. If you're strong enough, the experimentation with drugs, I think, can have some valuable effects if you can control it. But the glorification of drugs, I think, is insane. I think marijuana should be legalized and then discouraged. I think it's. I think, like if you smoke grass, I think it's hard to concentrate. I mean, if you smoke grass and then try to read an intelligent book, and and focus your mind, over a period of time, I think you find you can't do it. And to me, that's a dead giveaway that it just really is not the right direction to take a mind in.
Before Chicago, I was a long-time radical singer. I was at the conservative part of the radical movement at that point. It all came to a head in Chicago. It all collapsed for me at that point.
Right.
Did you really see revolution as the only alternative from then on?
At the time, I did, and I think there should be an American Liberation Front. I mean, even now, even with McGovern in power, I still think there should be an American Liberation Front.
But as far as McGovern's concerned, you would feel that if McGovern got in, that there would be some purpose served.
This is what I think has happened in America. I think America has a military coup. It occurred in 1963 with the assassination of John Kennedy. So in many ways, America's gone completely crazy. I mean, you have a really mad group of people in power. That is, people that just don't understand the world, whose greed and lack of intellect has has caused the deaths of millions of people at this point in Asia. It has destroyed a lot of things in America. I think a lot of things in America are very valuable, and they've destroyed that, and they're wreaking havoc on the world, and continue to. Okay, now McGovern, to me, represents part of a series of attempts to to save the situation. In '68, you had the two guys running. You had Kennedy and McCarthy running together. They had 80% of the electorate in back of them against Humphrey Johnson when you counted up the votes. So they killed Kennedy again, and they just dismissed McCarthy by a political maneuver at the convention. Okay, which left really the majority of the voting public disenfranchised. Then they had a non-election where they had 3 right-wing candidates running. Okay, so the forces recouped. Everybody went their own way, came back together, and it didn't have to be McGovern. It could have been other people. What it boils down to, and it turns out to be very good that it is McGovern because McGovern. Basically, I think McGovern has a very clear-cut historical view that, number one, America is way overextended, that the entire sense of priorities in America has to be completely rearranged, even to the economic structure. I say for the first time, maybe ever, America is going to be faced with a genuine election. There's a choice between 2 totally different programs. But when you have in the White House a man who was committed, on every level, he can end the war. He can pull the troops out of Vietnam. I mean, and number one, he can save Vietnamese lives. That's the most important thing. And he's gone even on record as saying, well, he'll do it even if he doesn't get the prisoners of war back. He'll go that far, which is fantastic. I mean, this is a presidential candidate saying this. The campaign itself will be a very good political education for America, as was the '68 one. So if he gets in, there'll be a total change in the nature of what America's all about. I mean, America will stop becoming the mad dog cop of the world, because the main force in the government is going to be pushing away from that. The Senate is already on that direction anyway. What you got to face then is the military and the corporations. A significant number of the corporations are so sick of what's going on in America anyway, and realize that they can't even keep their profits and their ownership by letting it being out of control like that. So some percentage of them, and there's no telling how big that percentage is, will be willing to back McGovern and sacrifice some profits just for the purpose of future profits. I mean, to balance the ship so we can, clear the air and start out again. That kind of trip. And the political forces that'll get behind McGovern are going to be extraordinary. The question is then, is what happens next? And how far will he go? Does he want to go? Is he able to go? How sophisticated is going to be the political movement that'll be around there? I mean, are there going to be a bunch of show business opportunists, hanging around for the glory? Are they going to, will it be business as usual? Once they get the mess out of the way?
Just getting back to your songwriting, in the context of all that, what do you see as your role, if you like, today? I mean, in your concerts here in Australia, you seem to have, I think, been doing mainly earlier stuff. I mean, had you for times lost the impetus to write?
Yeah, I've been very dry for a long time.
Why is that?
I don't know what it is. It happens to me all the time. But when I was a kid, songs came to me literally every week. Just like, and then they stopped coming, and then they came in batches. Rehearsals for Retirement was written in like a 2-week period. Greatest Hits was written in a 2-week period. Like one song triggered off another. And now I've started to write again for the first time in a while. And
you've just written some material here.
The day before I left for Australia, I wrote a song, which I recorded in Melbourne with Daddy Cool and a couple of great side musicians, and that'll probably come out in a couple of weeks.
Can you tell us about that?
It's a movie song. It's very likely will be in a movie it's called Kansas City Bomber, and it's a movie starring Raquel Welch as a roller derby queen. And this is a song. I never read the script, but I was on the movie set in Oregon and watched her make the movie, and turns out Raquel was the inspiration that broke my writing slump. And I just wrote this song about her, about some sort of, like how can I can't even describe it. It's just, it's in the direction of what I said originally about getting into the working class mentality, kind of thing. You know, I've been like going to like roller derby matches in Hollywood, for example, and you see that when you go there, you see everybody's maid, and the truck driver, and you know, and the people, you know, there they are. The people that in the universities are talking about, there they are, all together.
Do you feel as though there's anything you should be doing in your songwriting?
I should be writing. I should write a kind of Sun Records rock and roll album with political content. That's what I should be doing. I'm gonna try and do it. That's what I think I should be doing. Yeah.